Hey everyone, happy Friday. This week's edition of Friday Shares is dedicated to a hot topic from my conversations with teachers this month, and that is student accountability. I've been hearing a lot from you about chasing students and getting site directors involved and trying to figure out deadlines and making sure everyone's on top of the class. And I hear you on all of that. And that is a really important piece of teaching online, especially since for many of our students, GOA tends to fall to the bottom of the list of their many priorities. Our conversations about accountability have tended to revolve around the punitive side of it. How do I create a point system where I can deduct points for late assignments or missed appointments? How do I get the site director involved? How do I get the parent involved? And that's a really important part of the online accountability piece, is letting the students know that something is at stake. But I'm going to use this video to focus on a slightly different approach to accountability. I want us to think about accountability as it fits into our approach to course design and lesson design. And so I'm going to use 3 examples to think about 3 different kinds of ways we can make our students more accountable. The first example from Crimes Against Humanity, taught by Greg Feldman, is how to help students be more accountable to their own interests. The second example from Poetry by Jeff Schwartz is going to be about how to make students more accountable to their classmates, specifically in a peer-to-peer interaction. And the third example from Rick White's digital photography class is how to make students accountable to an audience. In all 3 cases, we have the teachers building projects that make the students accountable in doing the work. And so the punitive piece becomes less important because they've sort of foreseen some of the issues. So let's look at Greg's class first. Greg's class, Crimes Against Humanity, is a course focused on the history of genocide, and every week the students study a different genocide. But in the background is the project you're looking at right now, which is the students' web labs. And the web labs is an ongoing independent research project in which the students select any country in the world which is dealing with human rights issues right now. And their job is to build a Google site in which they share research and evaluation and basically give this country a human rights report card. By the end of the course, each student will have built a complete human rights report card in Google Sites that they can share with their classmates. If you scroll down here and you notice over here on the left, there's a whole separate page and set of subpages dedicated to this project. Every week, the students have a specific element of the page they're supposed to research and build and then show to Greg. What I like about this project is that Greg has built something really complicated and detailed, but at the same time given the students a lot of choice. They choose their country, and they choose the way they research it, and they choose how they evaluate the country's human rights record. In other words, Greg has built a project in which there's enough freedom that the students feel invested and therefore accountable to their own interests. At the same time, every single week they have to do something for this website, so it's not like they're just sort of out there working on the project. There is a routine involved. And that combination of a well-scaffolded project with a lot of student choice allows the students to feel that they are accountable to themselves rather than to just some assignment that they're doing that they might not be interested in. They feel like what they're doing will be worthwhile for them and in enhancing their own personal interests, and that will make the project a little bit better and will reduce Greg's issues with getting things in on time and meeting deadlines because the students are doing that naturally. In Jeff's poetry course, he studies a different poet every week, and I'm focusing on one week where he studied the poet James Wright. Because in addition to studying an individual poet, the students also write a poem every week. And in this particular week, Jeff had the students interview each other in a synchronous Google Hangout, as you see over here on the right. And the goal was to get to know each other, ask each other questions about your favorite activities, food, social life, etc. But the end game in all of this is the students are meant to write a poem based on that interview, and that poem should take the shape as a letter to their partner. What I really like about this is Jeff is building accountability into this assignment because he's making the students accountable to each other. The student's supposed to gather information and then produce something that will be shared with this partner that's a letter to the partner that shows that they know who this other person is. The poems that the students produced are amazing, some of the best poems I've read in this class. And so I think that speaks to the value and the sort of urgency that goes into actually having to write a letter to your peer as an assignment. And it also shows that the students are really investing in each other. When you think about making students more accountable, it doesn't have to be accountable just to you, the teacher. It can be finding ways to make the students accountable to each other. And that actually can sometimes work better because it's no longer about making the teacher the enemy. It's just about collaborating in a way that you can help each other make really good work. The last example is digital photography. And what I like about this particular week, street photography, is that Rick is really focusing on this idea of sending the students out into the world and making them more accountable to an audience. And this is something that I think a lot of different courses can deal with in different ways, but the idea of publishing something rather than just giving the teacher something makes the students accountable to a wider audience. This particular week, Rick's theme is street photography, and he wants the students to go out into their communities, wherever they happen to live, and take some photos of people on the street. And he provides some examples of certain kinds of street photography, which I really like. And this is a great assignment from a bunch of different perspectives, but ultimately what the students are doing is publishing their street photographs on their WordPress blogs. And by doing that, Rick is not really focusing on he himself as the audience. He's focusing on the entire class as an audience. The students need to publish these photos to their blogs, and then they are sort of evaluated through the comments on the blogs by their classmates. And so the students know going into this that they have a broader audience for their photography than just the teacher. This also works in classes like George's online journalism class and other courses where publishing work is a way to make students accountable without being punitive. If students feel like what's at stake here is sort of their public face to the class, then they tend to be more accountable to it. So I hope you found those 3 examples useful. This issue of accountability through course design was inspired by the work of a professor in Massachusetts, where I live. His name's James Lang, and I'll share some links with you. And his research is focused on this idea that cheating actually can be prevented through course design rather than through punishment. I'll share some articles about it. It's really interesting, but it's this idea that by rethinking the way we build our learning environment or building our lessons, we can actually solve this issue of accountability without having to be punitive, to do less chasing. And if you look at the data from these 3 courses that I just showed you, these are the projects that the students respond to most. These are the projects that the students feel they did the best job at, that were their most favorite, and they really liked because they felt like they were accountable to their own interests, to their peers, or to a larger audience. And I think that that's a really sort of positive way to weave more accountability into your courses. That's it. Thanks, everybody. Have a great weekend, and I'd love to hear your own thoughts and questions about this issue in the comments section. Thanks.